Zera Shimshon was an Italian rabbi who was born in 1707. He didn't have such a long life, unfortunately. He passed away at 72, which brings us to 1779. And he was a very special individual in the fact that not only was he a teacher, not only was he a philosopher, a writer, but he was also holding pulpit at 7 cities simultaneously in Italy. He was considered the chief rabbi of Italy during a certain period of time. So we can imagine how much of a burden and how amazing that really was, and how much he actually learnt from that experience and helped others through that experience. So he was very interesting. So his name was Rabbi Chaim Shimshon Nachmani. Rabbi Shimshon Chaim Nachmani. And he had one son, and unfortunately his son passed away at a young age. And for that reason, Rabbi Shimshon had no descendants. He had no continuation. And he was very sad and very hurt from that. So what he decided to do was he was going to take the Torah that he taught, write it, record it, and give that out not only during his lifetime, but it would be for the Jewish library forevermore. And he would adopt, as he writes in his introduction, he would adopt anyone who learns his book, learns his insights on the Chumash, on the Torah, as his very own children and grandchildren, and bestow them with ultimate blessings, as he says. So there are very few rabbis in history who ever made those types of promises. The Zera Shimshon being one of them, and his promise was that he will bless all those who learn his book, his commentary on the Torah, that they will grow old around their children and grandchildren sitting around the same table. They'll be blessed with health, long life, happiness, livelihood, and all great things. And he takes this as a promise. He says, I had no children. You want to become my child? It's very easy. Come into and learn the Torah that he wrote. We already learned this from the Talmud and from the Rambam, that a rabbi or a teacher of an individual is also like their parent, to the point where a person's rabbi is actually greater than their own parent. Why is that? Because one's parent brings them into this world. But we all know this world is not the end goal. Where's the end goal? The end goal is to the next world, to our everlasting and hopefully our heaven. And one's rabbi is there to guide them how to get to that end goal, to get to their place, their portion in the world to come in the best way. So what is the greatest? The greatest is when one's father or one's parent is their teacher or is their rabbi. But if not, there is that dichotomy, and then there is that special relationship that there is between a parent, but there's also between one's teacher or one's rabbi, one's mora, even in that respect. This week we are studying Parashat Vayeshev. And in this week's Torah portion, the Torah is now transitioning from making Jacob the main character, which he still is a major player and character in this Torah portion, but now shifts and introduces us in a much greater way his favorite son, as we will soon see, Joseph. Now, just to keep us up to speed and give us a timeline of this portion of Jacob's life, it's important that we remember the steps that he took from the moment that he left his father's home. He was age 63. He was not a young kid. He was at age 63 when his mother convinced him to go and take the blessing that their father, Isaac, wanted to give to Esav. Rivka came and really pushed him to go against his will. At age 63, can you imagine, to go and get this blessing? he does. There was a big fight. Esav was definitely not happy about it. Isaac himself was scared for his own life when Esav cried out and was screaming. So their parents, both Isaac and Rivka, came to the conclusion that it would be best for Jacob to leave. It would be best for him to leave in order that he finds himself a better wife to get married to, namely going to her own family. So he married his cousins, we're soon going to see. And also, so this way, there's not such a machloket, not such tension and contention between Jacob and his brother Esav. So at 63, he sets out. He sets out, but he doesn't go straight to where his parents told him to go. He actually takes a stop. This was a rather long stop. This was a 14-year stop in the yeshiva, the study hall of Shem and Ever. Shem was the son of Noach, his grandson Ever, and he was there for 14 years. Our commentaries tell us that he didn't even sleep for those 14 years. He was day and night learning Torah and getting really deep into all the secrets of the creation and all godliness and everything that there is to know at that time. And that's what he did for 14 years. 14 years passed. He now moves on and goes to his uncle's house, Lavan. At Lavan's house, he sets his eye upon his cousin, the younger of the two, Rachel. And he is set out to marry Rachel. Lavan says, well, you want to marry my daughter, you're going to have to show me something for it. Yaakov came with nothing. Everything that he came with, that he was going to use as a gift to give to his future father-in-law, his nephew, Eliphaz, the son of Esav, actually stripped him from. So he came empty-handed. He was lucky that he even came with the shirt that he had on his back. And he comes to Lavan, and Lavan tells him, okay, you have nothing, you want my daughter? Let's do a deal. You work 7 years, I'll give her to you. So that's what he did. And as we all know the story, Lavan was very swift, and he switched Rachel for Leah for Rachel, and he was wed. Next morning, I'm doing this fast because this is a recap. Next morning he wakes up, he was definitely not happy of what happened. A week later he marries Rachel, and now he has to work another 7 years. So he already spent 14 years in yeshiva. He spent another 14 years working for two wives. One of them, which he really wanted, and the other, as we see hints to it, he wasn't so enthusiastic about. So he's already away for 28 years. Then he spends another 6 years at Lavan's house. And he says, very nice. I worked 14 years for you, and everything came out very nice. You are very successful, but now it's time that I take care of myself, my wives, and my family. So he did so for another 6 years, totaling up to 14 plus 20 is 34 years so far. At that time, Yaakov, I know everyone's trying to run math, Yaakov is 97 years old, right? 63 plus 34. Yaakov is 97 years old, and he is, by no means, a young whippersnapper. Yet, God comes to him in a revelation and tells him a prophecy. Now get up and go home. It's time. On his way home, we know who he meets, and this was in last week's Torah portion. He meets his brother Esav for the first time in 34 years. That's a long time. And then we discussed last week exactly what that encounter was like and the meaning behind that. I'm not mentioning this for no reason, but we're going to soon see why that was an important part. Needless to say, afterwards, Yaakov makes, as the way the Talmud says, a mistake, and he doesn't go home right away. He spends another 2 years. Some would say wandering, others would say procrastinating. Again, Jacob at his high level, we can never be so derogatory about the choices that he made, but at his level, he procrastinated and did not go directly home after God told him to. And unfortunately, two very sad events took place. One being that his own daughter, Dinah, was defiled by Shechem, the son of Hamor, which, as we know, means donkey, so it's obviously not the most popular name. Even though he was a king, he was called King Donkey. And his son Shechem did something horrible to Dinah, as we all know, and that was very hard on Jacob. Again, he's 97 years old. Next thing that happens is, unfortunately, the love of his life, Rachel, passes away. This was before he enters the land of Israel. So that happened during those 2 years. So that would take us that at age 99, Jacob finally comes home, reunites with his father and his mother. At this point, so now we picked up and we made a nice summary of Jacob's part of this life, part of his life. He comes home, and Joseph is at that time 8 years old. And Joseph was, as we're going to read in a moment, Jacob's favorite child. He loved him. So what he did was he said, we're going to keep you in the tent. We're going to keep you with your grandfather, Yitzchak, Isaac. We're going to keep you with me. And you're going to be studying everything that I know and learned. I'm going to pass on to you. Now, if we stop for a moment and we look at this, we can all say that's favoritism. The last time favoritism was shown, or put it this way, the first time favoritism was shown in our Torah, it was definitely not a good result. Can anyone guess when the first time in the Torah favoritism was shown? Well, that was actually, in some way, we can relate to that as God showing it to Abel over Cain. Cain and Abel both came. Cain was the first one to come with his gift to God. And then Abel copied him. And God accepted Abel's over Cain's. We're not going to speak about that now. We've discussed that in the past, why that was actually not called favoritism. But that seemed to us as favoritism, and it didn't come out good, because then Cain gets up and kills his brother Abel. So maybe there were other times. Well, yes, there was Ishmael and Yitzchak, and Abraham showed favoritism. That wasn't a healthy relationship. Yaakov in his own life, his father favored Esav, his mother favored him, and that was not a healthy relationship. But how could it be that Jacob, the final of the three forefathers, who is told to us by our sages, the most complete and greatest of all three, how could he fall into the same mistake in showing favoritism? Furthermore, the Talmud tells us, as parents, we're all parents, as fathers, as mothers, to not show difference to our children. It's not healthy for our relationship and for their relationship when we show difference between one child and the next. Yes, every child needs their own and has their own special needs and wants. It doesn't mean everyone gets the same thing, but when there are too many changes and differences being shown to one or to some and not to the others, that causes a non-healthy and a contentious relationship, to say the least. So the Zera Shimshon comes out and asks, why is Jacob doing this mistake with his son Joseph? So before we proceed with his answer, we'll look at the first 3 verses of this week's Torah portion, starting at the beginning of chapter 37, and I'll quote. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megure aviv be'eretz Kenan. That Jacob is returning to the land of his father, the land of Canaan. Next verse, verse 2. Ele toledot Yaakov. These are the offsprings of Jacob. And then it says Joseph is 17 years old. And he would supervise his brothers, who were the shepherds over Jacob's flock. Yet he would also be vehunar. He was still a lad. He was only 17. And he would spend the most of his time with the maidservants' children, Bilhah and Zilpah's kids, namely because they were more similar in age, and also the children of Leah, they thought of themselves to be more elite, they're from the first wife, they're from the wife who bare children right away, 6 of them. There was a difference. And Joseph, unfortunately for him, was thrown in the group of the children of the maidservants, even though his wife was actually the most loved wife. Then, the Torah tells us that he would bring Vayaveh Yosef et dibatam ra'a el avihem, that Joseph would bring slander, say the nasty things that his brothers would do to his father, Jacob. Then the one more verse, and then we'll explain. Then the verse 3 tells us, V'Yisrael, referring to Jacob, Ahav et Yosef, he loved Joseph, Mikol banav, more than any other of his sons. Why, the Torah says, Ki ben zekunim hu lo, because he was a child of his old age. He was, as we like to say, the golden child. And ve'asa lo ketonet pasim, you know what he did? He actually made for him a beautiful, colorful garment. It was actually a very special jacket, and it was given to him. There's so much to speak about over here. We're going to delve into what the Zera Shimshon says, but just to give us a little bit of background for a moment, our commentators, specifically Rashi, tells us that Joseph unfortunately made 2 mistakes. Mistake number 1 is when he came out for the first time, he was 17 years old. This was the first time since they got there, since he was 8, that he actually is leaving this tent, the tent where he would always be studying with his father and his grandfather. The first time he comes out, and he makes 2 very serious mistakes. The first is where the Torah tells us, Vehu nar, and he is a lad. Rashi and others explain that what he did was, he went and he started pampering himself. He started caring, at his level, too much about the way he looked and the way he appeared. And at his level, that was something which was overdone, and it led him towards this unfortunate package of mistakes, if we say it that way. The next thing he did, which was very severe and definitely worse, is that he told his father 3 things which were negative about his brothers. And the truth is, commentaries go to great extent. Even last year's Zera Shimshon video, we explained exactly how Joseph actually had a obligation to judge them favorably, and he didn't. He said that they would be eating from live animals before they were slaughtered. He said that they were unfortunately involved in promiscuity and things which were not so kosher between them and other women. And he also said that they were treating the maidservants' children as servants and as slaves. So he was going and telling his father nasty things about the brothers, and the brothers now became very angry. But let's face it, we all have either brothers or sisters, or we know what it is like to grow up between siblings. And there is sometimes sibling rivalry, most of the time on a healthy level. Growing up with brothers, yeah, sometimes we say nasty things to each other, sometimes we beat on each other, but at the end of the day, we're brothers. We're not going to go and sell your sibling to... Sorry, getting some eyes. You're not going to go and sell your sibling to Arab merchants so that you never need to see them again. It's very extreme, especially if all he did to you was tattletale on you 3 different occasions or for 3 different topics to your dad, and then he had these 2 kooky dreams about everyone bowing down to him. Is that really enough to warrant selling your sibling, trying to get rid of them for life? Not really. So listen to the Zera Shimshon's approach. And I think we're going to really come out with a solid lesson that we can apply to each and every one of our lives, and even on a daily basis. The Zera Shimshon teaches us that the problem of showing favoritism or acting different with one of our own children over the next is that favoritism then breeds jealousy or envy. What happens after there's jealousy or envy is then there's this concept, and we're going to explain exactly what that means. There's a concept of ayin hara, the evil eye. And that evil eye is then going to be transferred into causing damage to that child. So when you make, if we'll say we have two children, you have Reuben and Shimon, and you're showing favoritism to Reuben over Shimon. By a parent showing favoritism to that child, now Shimon is jealous and he's envious. And now Shimon looks bad at his brother. And then that looking bad with that evil eye causes damage to Reuben. And then whether he acts or not could even cause and go into a physical damage, like we see the brothers of Joseph actually did. This was something that the Zera Shimshon is wondering, how could Yaakov not think about this? The evil eye, ayin hara, especially Sfaradim take it a little more seriously, or a lot more seriously. But before we think it's only a Sephardic thing to be worried about what we call ayin hara, the evil eye, the Talmud, which precedes the whole split by a long, long time between Sephardic Jewry and Ashkenazic Jewry, says, if you would walk, or if you do, walk into a cemetery, you can be sure of one thing, that 99 out of 100 people who are buried there died because of the damage caused to them by ayin hara, by the evil eye. And only 1 out of every 100 that is buried in the cemetery died because of natural occurrence. That's powerful. That's not the Zohar, and that's not any Chassidut. That's the Talmud. The Talmud is the law. The Talmud is the facts. And the Talmud teaches us that if you go into the cemetery, why bad things happen to people is more often than not, it's 99% of the time, because of how others look bad upon us. God forbid. So we're going to speak about that, but we have a problem. How can Jacob do this, cause this to Joseph? Why would he show difference and show favoritism to Joseph? If he loves him so much, he should know that this is only going to breed animosity, and it's going to breed jealousy and them being envious of him. Why would he want to hurt his own son? Couldn't he have thought about that? So, going back to when they met, when Joseph and Jacob and everyone else met Esav for the first time, at that time, Joseph was 6 years old, and he did something very special. When Yaakov meets his brother Esav, he first meets him after sending him the messengers, and they make peace, and then he introduces his whole family to his brother Esav. Because Esav goes, "What's all that? Oh, it's my wives, my kids, my flock." So they introduce each other. And Jacob was very scared. He didn't want Esav to put his eyes on his family. But he kind of didn't have a choice. It was his brother. So he first brought the maidservants with their children. And then he brought Leah with her children. And then he introduced Rachel and her child, at that time only Joseph, to Esav. And each and every person, when they met Esav, they bowed, including Yaakov himself. And all of his children, all his wives bowed. Joseph was the only one who didn't. Joseph did something very bold and special. Remember, keep in mind, he was only 6 years old at that time. When his mother bowed, Joseph, being only 6 years old, stood up straight and tall right in front of her, so this way Esav would not set his eyes on his mother. He didn't want Esav, the evil man's eyes, to be set on his mother Rachel. So he stood up in front of his mother to prevent any damage that could be caused by Esav to Rachel, his mother. At that moment, he was blessed. And later on, even Jacob speaks about the blessing that he gave him. He blesses Joseph that he will never be damaged from other people's bad eyes. He was blessed, Ben Porat Yosef, Ben Porat Ale'ain. He was blessed to be, as the Talmud says, not Ale'ain, read it, Ole'ain, on top of the eye. That people would look bad at him and it wouldn't damage him. That was Jacob's intention. Jacob's like, I could do whatever I want. I could show favoritism. I could show difference to him. He's the one that I love the most. Because he did something that granted him a blessing to not be damaged. Yet what is the problem? The problem is that he was not 100%. If Joseph would have been 100% perfect, which no one is, then he would have had that blessing to be foolproof. The issue is like we said, he came out and he started caring about his appearance. He started pampering himself too much. He started saying Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is so strong that it can even damage an invincible barrier that one has to block themselves from bad eye. And unfortunately, Joseph was damaged by this. But there's something we can all learn. And this we learned from Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, who was a great rabbi from the previous generation, originally from the UK, made his way to the Holy Land. And he writes that there are 3 things that a person can do that causes other people's ayn hara to be set on them, evil eye to be set on them. And then he says that there are 3 things that we can do to guard ourselves and protect ourselves as much as possible from other people's evil eye. So here it goes. The first thing he says is that whenever someone does something that causes shock to those that are looking at it, right away people's eyes are activated to do ayn hara, to now have an evil eye. For example, if someone does something out of the ordinary for them, they talk a certain way which is not normal, they do something, they are wearing something, driving something that is not befitting to them, that's not their standard, then people will look, and that looking is now something which is turned into an evil eye. So making sure to always not do anything which is too shocking to anybody. That's number 1. Number 2, he says, a person has to be very careful not to do things which will promote others to be envious or jealous of them. Because as we mentioned earlier, envy and jealousy is something which activates other people's evil eye onto ourselves, God forbid. And the third is to try as much as possible to stay away from people who are, as we say in Hebrew, and I'll translate, they are tsar ha'ain. They have a very small eye. They have a very stingy eye. What happens is they look at everything other people have and they say, it should have been me. I should have had it. That's my success. That's my accomplishment. I should have had that. To stay as much as possible away from those people, because those people, as our sages teach us, have a mental illness. They're not able to be happy for others because they're not happy with what they have for themselves. They're not happy with what God allotted them. And these are the 3 things we need to be careful of. Now, what are 3 things we could be proactive about to try as much as possible to keep our barrier up from the evil eye damaging us of other people, obviously? Number 1 is to have a good eye. Ayn tova. If we always look at other people and we're happy for them and we have a good eye, then other people's bad eye that looks on us is diminished, if not vanquished completely. Because I'm only using my eyes for good. Other people's eyes can be used on me only for good. It's like measure for measure. Another is that we should be as much as possible hidden, tsanua, dignified. The Talmud learns this from fish. He says, why are fish the most numerous species in the world? Everything should be. Why were fish the ones who were not destroyed, or better yet, the only ones who were not punished by the flood, the great flood in the time of Noah? It's because they are underneath the water, and under the water, it's all dark, it's all quiet. The world, the sea world, does not see what goes on, and they're able to procreate, and they're able to live, and be happy, and multiply, and live their lives not in the eye of everyone else. So that's the second thing or mechanism that we can do to keep people's evil eye away from us. And the third is a concept called Ein Shelo Zanta, an eye who has not done wrong. Meaning, the way Rabbi Dessler explains, is if we are givers and not takers, we are above this concept of evil eye attacking us. Meaning, some people can give of their time, their advice, others give money, others give wisdom, others give manpower, help people with chores or building things. Whatever a person does and they turn themselves into a giver opposed to a taker, now God has to think and say, wait, before we damage this person, before I allow other people's evil eye to damage this person, who's getting affected? Well, if he's a taker, not too many people are getting affected. Maybe just the immediate family. But if he's a giver, if she's a giver, then God says, should I allow this person's evil eye activate damage onto this person or not? So a lot was said. We'll be able to review it in another time. You can review it by watching the video. But these are very strong concepts that we learn from Jacob. Jacob thought that Joseph would not be damaged. Unfortunately, Joseph was not so perfect. If Joseph was not so perfect, we're not too perfect. Our children are not too perfect. For our lesson, we need to make sure to not show favoritism to one of our children over the other. Every child needs their own special things, their support, their little gadgets, their time out. Doesn't mean everyone needs the same thing, but we need to, as parents, as much as possible, try to give what every child needs specifically tailor-made to them. It does sometimes mean that one child's going to have more time than another one, but we need to make sure that we take their love tanks. I've spoken about love tanks before. That we monitor their love tank to make sure that our children's love tanks are full enough to be healthy, happy, and confident. And one of the greatest things, amongst other very special things, or sad things, but one of the greatest things which does promote a lack of confidence, which tampers with the growth of our children, is unfortunately when one is being favored over the other, or one is being favored over the others. May God bless us in the merit of the Zera Shimshon to always have the wisdom that God imbues in each and every one of us to give each of our children exactly what they need and to not let them feel, because we're really not intending on showing favoritism from one onto the other.